scooter thing is. And we should also look at some of the questions that have been asked already. Bookmarks. How do I go to my history here?
You trying to get to your email?
No, I'm trying to get to my history on this. There, that looks promising. There we go. Okay, so the Pride Raptor, that's what it's called. Yeah.
We need to have the projector on.
Oh yes, turn on the projector. Get that thing up and running. Okay, now. Today is the 27th, right? 29th, rather. Shit. Okay, so today, according to our schedule, we are in the middle of our exam, and it's ask question time on, as far as questions that have already been asked. Somebody did ask a question by email, so let's go take a look at that. Where's my email? That's not what I'm doing. There we go. Good night. Everything takes forever on this computer. It already said it was opening my mailbox. Okay. Here we go. Graham asked the following questions. Here we go. Number one was, why did you decide to buy this certain scooter and not a different kind? And my response was, I like the color, the large seat that is easy to get into. Also, I could order it online and get it in the mail. I think that was the biggest reason he bought it. He just likes ordering things and getting mail. Second question was, do you have any other sort of safety other than a seatbelt? He wears a helmet when he drives a scooter. Number three is, how often do you need to use the scooter? Do you need to get around, or could you do without it? So I really don't need the scooter, but I like to have some independence. I'll use it 1 to 3 times per week for less than an hour each trip. 4 is, if you did fall on your scooter, would you have any way to get help? 4 is, I carry a cell phone with me, but it's not always easy to use when I fall down. That's happened more than once with him, where he has fallen down on uneasy feet, and his cell phone, which he usually carries around his neck, sometimes he doesn't. But even if he does carry it around his neck and it gets stuck underneath him somehow, it can be difficult. Or if he falls in such a way that he can't use one arm or the other because he hurts it or something, that's a problem. Is there another form of transportation you could use that is safer than the scooter? and he can be driven places, but he really kind of wants his independence. I want my independence, right? And you'll find that this is often the case with engineering projects that you may encounter in your life, where somebody wants to do something that's not necessarily the best thing in the world for them to do, right? However, as engineers, it's not really our job to tell them what to do. And sometimes if we try to, we can lose the job, right? So if he's saying, yeah, I want some independence, then probably just say, okay, let's do what we can to give him all the independence he can. So those are good questions, but make sure that you read the answers with that kind of idea in mind, that the answers can guide what they want you to do for them and what they may not want you to do for them. So that is that list of questions. Does anybody have any follow-up questions concerning these 5? I've got another list to talk about as well as soon as we discuss these ones. Anybody have any follow-up questions? Any more information they'd like to know about these things?
Does the vehicle have a parking brake?
It does have a parking brake. Now, remember that you are responsible for taking notes during this time, so you should have some paper out and should be taking notes, and these notes should be in your final report for this project. So it can either be paper or on computer, it doesn't matter to me, but you should at least be taking notes. This email, of course, was sent to you, so you can print this off and use it as part of your project. I think everybody should have gotten this email. If you didn't get this email, send me an email and I'll send it to you.
I got it. I found it.
Okay, any other follow-up questions? We're not looking for new questions, just some follow-up questions to any of these questions. Any of these 5
like,
would be.
What kind of like helmet does he wear? Does he like wear like a full face mask or?
No, it's actually kind of like a bike helmet. It's actually, I think it is actually a bike helmet. So certainly not a motorcycle helmet, which is probably what he should be wearing. Doesn't have anything that covers below his ears. Nothing covering the front. Anything else?
And do you know about how far he goes on his trips? Like,
so far, he's only tried to go a few blocks at a time. He would like eventually to be able to go maybe as far as a nearby store. So he lives maybe, I think he lives about a half mile from the nearest store / pharmacy, which might be the farthest he might ever go. He might go to the hospital, which is about the same distance, about a half mile. Or down in that region, that area where there's a few little businesses. I can't imagine him going any further than that. Okay, with that in mind, let's go to our next questions from Brody. 5 questions as well.
Yes.
So how well can you control your fingers and your thumbs? Okay, because of stroke, the left hand, he has almost no fine motor control with, and he has very little strength. He has one finger in his thumb that he can grip things with in his left hand, but not very tightly. He doesn't have a lot of strength there. Right now, that's what he's using to apply his brake on the left side of the bike, which is a grip brake, a lever brake rather. So he's using one finger and one thumb on that left hand. On his right hand, he has more fine motor control, although it's still not much. He does have more. That's the hand that he uses for writing and for eating and pretty much anything that requires him to use his fingers to manipulate anything and to grab anything. And it's fairly strong, but not nearly as strong as it used to be. And that's the hand that he's using for the throttle. That one he can twist with, he can grip with, he can use, he can do articulated things with the fingers. but his hand does shake a little bit still, and the strength just is not necessarily all that there. So having a really good notion of how far he's twisting something is kind of iffy. How far he's, that's pretty much what caused the problem. Is he thought he was just tweaking the throttle a little bit, but he just kind of slipped and tweaked it too much and whoop, doing a wheelie. Then the next question is, do you want a throttle that twists, or do you want a thumb throttle? So probably if you were asking him this question, he would probably insist that what he's doing with the twisting throttle is just fine. Which what he's doing is he's kind of grabbing it on the end with his fingers, kind of like you would grab maybe like a volume knob on a stereo or something, and he's kind of twisting it that way, and he thinks he's got enough control. But I would suggest that he doesn't, since he just did a wheelie with that. So sometimes what he might tell you, what your client might tell you, might not be exactly what you need to know, because they're insisting one thing and really the other thing. I would probably guess that some other type of throttle would be better. A thumb throttle might be better. It would depend on kind of what's easiest for him. So we might have to look at a variety of different types of throttles and maybe even test them out before we get there. But that's a good question to ask, because that maybe leads us to, here are 5 different kinds of throttles. Let's see which one you have the best motor control with, right? That might lead to a little experiment that helps us to get this knowledge nailed down. Next one is about how far do you go on each trip. We just asked that question, which is just a few blocks probably, maybe as much as a quarter mile, half a mile, but not much more than that. Kind of helmet do you wear? We already asked that. How easy is it to move the armrest if you fall? That's a good question. I don't really know. From his, I mean, the armrest just rotates up like this, and it just kind of folds up out of the way. And I do believe that the chair rotates, but I could be wrong about that. I know that it at least slides back and forth. I thought that he said it rotated, but I'm not seeing any indication in the pictures here. But the armrest isn't difficult to move as long as the bike, doesn't get wedged somewhere where the armrest is a problem. Him being a bigger gentleman, he might, and not having great control with his left arm, he might have a real problem moving that armrest if it falls on the right side and he's trying to lift the armrest on his left side. He can't really reach across his body with his arm very well, and his left arm, of course, is just pretty much useless. So probably depends on the situation, but it could be probably quite difficult if it fell over and tipped sideways. Does anybody have any follow-up questions concerning these 5 questions? Anything that you want to know more about? Okay. So this is the time when the rest of you have your opportunity to ask your questions. If you you should ask, each person should ask at least 5 questions that are unique questions, have not been asked before, about this project, so that we can get as much information as possible. And then you should take notes on those, and those notes should be turned in with your final report. So,
Have you contacted the manufacturer?
have I contacted the manufacturer about this problem? I have not.
What's the budget for this project?
Ah, the ever important question, what is the budget for this project? Well, let's see, the actual machine cost about $2,300. So if I'm going to make this machine more serviceable for me, I probably want to keep it under, depending on what we do to it, I suppose. If we are able to improve, I suppose there's 3 routes that I'm thinking we could probably go with this. The first route is we could just make it so that it won't tip over. That's a possibility. There are some things that we could add to this or build onto this in some way so that it won't tip over. We could just make that happen. If that's the case, then probably, I'm guessing less than $100. Maybe between 100 and 200 at the most, but probably less than $100 we could make this thing so it just won't tip over. If we're talking about changing the throttle so that it's easier to use so it won't tip over, that's probably going to be a little pricier. So we're talking that, if we're going that direction, we're probably talking $300 maybe. If we're going to fix both the throttle and the brake so that they're both easier to use and make this safer, then probably we want to keep it under 500. But also there's the, as engineers, it's our job to say, you know what? We can do the simplest thing, which is maybe just don't tip it over, and we could do that for a pretty low price. But here are 2 other options that we could also do, because as an independent person, he may want to just have a throttle that's easier to use, so he still has the option of doing wheelies. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of cool to do wheelies.
Would you care if anything's hanging off the back end, like a wheelie brake thing?
I don't think so, as long as it's not too long. If it's too long, it's going to be difficult for him to get into his garage, I think. So I think if it was less than a foot in length, maybe, then it would probably be okay. More than a foot, it would be a little iffy.
Half of your answer already answered one of my questions, which was where is it stored and how much space could be used in there?
So he has essentially a double garage, 2 single garage doors next to each other. The inside garage space is connected, so there's quite a bit of space in there. They only put 1 car in that garage. So he puts his scooter on the other side. There are some things stored in the other side, but there's a fair amount of room. A standard garage door is 9 feet wide, and I think this one's maybe a little wider than that. It's maybe 9 or 10 feet wide of space by a good 15 to 20 feet of space. It is totally, he's got a lot of space for it. So.
Are there any weight restrictions for the whole thing?
Oh, hold on just 1 second. We had a question here.
How long ago was this purchased?
How long ago was it purchased? This was just purchased recently, within the last month or 2. What was your question, McCook?
Are there any weight restrictions for after the modifications?
Weight restrictions on modifications. So it says that the weight capacity is 400 pounds. And we're probably talking 250 pounds for the user or so. So you've probably got about 100 pounds to play with.
Can you describe the frame on the underside, or is there a frame on the underside of the scooter?
Yes, it is it's a metal bar frame, and you can kind of see it here. See if we can get a better view of it. You can kind of see it here in the picture. It's it's got these metal tube bars essentially that are bolted together, and you can actually see on the back here it's got some little wheelie wheels on the back, but that metal bar connects this back half of it to the front half. This comes in 3 different pieces. It's essentially the front half, the back half, and the chair, I think, all come separately. And so you bolt them together right about there on these metal bars that are underneath there. So it's pretty solid underneath this plastic frame where you put your feet.
What's the time frame for the project?
The time frame is going to be this class, I think. So we have till December.
The site mentions that there are 2 containers in it. Does this person hold much within the cart, or is it just empty most of the time?
So I mean, it has 2 places for storage.
Yeah, there's one under the seat, and then there's one under the handlebars, it looks like.
Oh yeah, I see the one here, the little thing here. I don't think he's using them for anything. It's possible he might, but I don't think so.
Okay. Also, I'd like to confirm that the seat does not pivot. I checked one of the other sites.
Okay.
It doesn't. But
So
the
no
seat
pivot on the
itself-
seat.
The seat itself can be angled a little bit for comfort reasons.
Reclined.
Yeah, it can
But
be
it
kind
doesn't-
of reclined,
But it doesn't rotate to
swivel.
the side.
No.
Okay. Good to know. Yes.
Did, when he bought that, did it come with any type of training or anything like that, like training materials?
I think that there is a video either that came with it or that it shows a link to maybe.
No, it came with a delivery service according to that.
Tell you the truth, I don't truly know if that's the case. I thought that he mentioned he watched a video on it, but I don't see one here. I'd assume that it would be here available as well, but I don't really see anything. So I don't know the answer to that question. Any other questions?
How well does it handle sharp turns?
I'd imagine at one of its higher speeds, it probably doesn't handle them all that well. It is a 3-wheel vehicle after all, with its 2 wheels on the back, which usually means instability. My guess is that it probably doesn't handle them well at speed. I don't know for sure. But most 3-wheel vehicles that are stable or more stable have their single wheel in the back as their drive wheel, and their 2 wheels in the front provide it the stability that it needs when it's turning. But like I said, I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing that from what I know about stability.
Looks like it has a wheelie bar in the back.
It does have 2 little wheelie bars with 2 little tiny wheels on the back that you can kind of see here. But, and my neighbor, when he did his wheelie, he did not say that he fell over. He actually didn't fall over, as far as I know. It just scared him. So maybe those wheelie bars kicked in for him and helped him. So maybe what our job is to just make it so it doesn't do quite as much of a wheelie or something like that.
Would you happen to know if the motor is a direct connection to the wheels or if there's some sort of transmission system?
I would imagine that something like this would not have any kind of transmission involved. I don't know if they talk about that. My guess would be that there is no gearing, just because that would be more moving parts to brake, more maintenance because you'd have to grease your. I'd imagine it is a direct drive. And even if it's not exactly a direct drive, it might be belt driven. But I would guess that it's probably a direct drive. So.
Does your scooter allow access to the internal parts, specifically the wiring and electronics?
There is access to those things, but I don't know if it voids the warranty or not. Probably does. Yeah, right here. Repairs and modifications made to any part without specific consent from Pride. So if we make some of those things, we have to think about it before we do it, so we can decide whether or not it's worth it to void the warranty. So we might want to consider that. We'll have to consider that and make that a priority for discussion directly with our client if we decide to move forward with this project in the future. Anybody else have any questions they need to ask? You're more than welcome to ask more specific questions to get numbers and values that you think you might need. Of course, you can also use the website to get some of that. Okay, if there are no more questions, speak up while I'm speaking. But if you don't have any more questions, then let's go back to our exam and talk about what is expected of you. Okay, so clarify above need statement, asking follow-up questions. That was what we've just done. So you should end up with a list of objectives and a clear need statement that describes the essential elements of the design problem. So you need to take all the information that you've gathered and put that together and include all of your notes, questions that were asked, so on and so forth. Then, you need to conduct research into this problem so you can ask any pertinent follow-up questions. So that's also something that you may have already done. But any research that you do, you should include with this test. So research into materials that you might use, devices that you might use, whatever else, start researching things. And if you have any follow-up questions, either ask them by email or, let's see, the test is scheduled for Monday, so you have to ask your follow-up questions by email, because on Monday we want to, well, I guess on Monday we can ask our final follow-up questions, and then you can turn in the test later that day, and that's fine too. So we have one more day where you can ask follow-up questions, but this weekend should be the weekend where you start doing some research into things that you might do, some possible solutions for this. You're going to classify your objectives as needs and wants. So that's something that we can talk about on Monday as well, unless you want to talk about it now, it's up to you. needs and wants and give each of them a weighting for importance. Actually, let's do that Monday. And then you create an organized objective tree. So if you have any questions that are not about classifying these problems, to get some more information about questions 1 and 2, then you're going to have to email them to me. But then on Monday, we'll talk about the needs and wants, and you'll ask your questions about those to get information for weighting. And then you'll do your objective tree and possible solutions. So these things don't necessarily have to be done in order. You can do many of these things kind of concurrently. So looking at possible solutions, obviously some of you already have some in mind. You can start researching those. But you should also be thinking about what are the objectives, what are the things that you're trying to accomplish for sure, so that you get good possible solutions, right? So that your solutions fit the actual problem. What I would do is, if I was doing this test right now, is I would work on compiling all the information I have so far and organizing it into groups, different groups for my objectives tree, and then classifying and starting to figure out what I think are the most important objectives or the most important things, so that I can ask pointed questions on Monday for what's the most important stuff, and then giving them, their classifications and their weighting. And then after you've got all that information, you can finish up everything else. You can finish up the objective tree, you can finish up the finding of possible solutions to consider, because then you'll have a clear idea of what the problem is, what the client's needs and wants are, and you'll be able to make best use of that information. Any questions? Any more things that you'd like to get out of me? Okay, I'm going to turn you loose for the weekend. Be prepared on Monday to wrap this all up, and then we will move on to the Rube Goldberg project, which should be fun.
Month or so.
Have a good week. How many students were in this today?